Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome to today's program Mark Voss, who's Business Development Manager for EMEA at Manhattan Associates. And today we're going to talk about trends and challenges in the European transportation market. Now, here in the United States, it's very easy to become, hyper-focused in terms of what's happening here in the U.S. with regard to transportation. But the reality is that, particularly for a lot of our clients and, followers, is that they have, operations around the world. So it's critically important to really keep a pulse on what's happening in other transportation markets around the world. And that's certainly true in terms of Europe. I mean, a lot going on in the European transportation market. And it's great to have Mark with us on the program today, who's kind of in the front lines of this and sees this every day with the companies he works with there in Europe. So looking forward to hearing his perspectives and insights and advice on this topic. So Mark, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So Mark, you're a first-time guest on Talking Logistics, and like I always do when someone new comes in the program, I'm always curious about how they got involved in supply chain logistics to begin with. So, why don't you briefly just tell us a little bit about your career path and how and why you got involved with supply chain logistics and what your current role and responsibilities are there at Manhattan?
Okay, so how do I get involved in transportation logistics? Really simple. During my final 2 years at university, my master's degree in economics, I got really an interest in transport and logistics. I have to know that my uncle at the time was head of the largest industry body for representing transportation and logistics service providers in the Netherlands. So that probably pushed me in that direction. And after I graduated, I joined a startup company called Metapack in London, very small at the time, and got some great years there. And after 4 years, I decided I got this fantastic opportunity to start working for Manhattan Associates, where I'm nowadays a business development manager working in EMEA with customers and prospects to kind of identify the value of our transportation management solutions, what can offer to their businesses.
Great. So a little family influence perhaps there, and
absolutely.
And then obviously, I think you made the right choice. Way back at the university when you kind of got interested in this industry, because obviously there's so much going on in this industry. It's just a continuous opportunity. So
absolutely.
So let's, to get started, I mean, what are some of the, key trends and challenges that you're seeing in the European transportation market today?
Well, there's many trends, but I think one of the key trends we're seeing at the moment, especially across Western European countries, is the grocery retailers investing in their convenience store formats, and that's largely in response to the changing consumer behavior. So I don't know what about the US, but in Europe, European consumers are nowadays buying more and more smaller amounts more frequently in comparison with the past, where people would go for a large weekly shop on the Saturday or something like that at the local supermarket. And nowadays people do more smaller shops. And as a result of that, the complexity has really increased for those grocery retailers. And looking at many things like the location of these convenience stores, they are typically located closer to the consumer. So in city centers, in railway stations, in service stations. And that means that the retailers have to take into account various things like restrictions with regards to unloading space for the trucks, even road access to the stores, so that really impacts the vehicle selection. Another thing is delivery time windows for city centers. That seem to be becoming more the norm than the exception nowadays. And of course, environmental constraints. Look at London and Paris, where there are major restriction at the type of vehicles that are allowed to enter the streets. And then also another element there is the frequency that they have to replenish those convenience stores. They typically have a limited storage available. So retailers are faced with the fact that they have all these restrictions but need to replenish those stores more often throughout the day. And then the final part of that is the prevalence of these convenience stores, where these convenience stores, the consumers will not necessarily go to the same convenience store every single day, depending on their route home, the activities that they might decide to use a different convenience store each day. So put it all together, it means that the grocery retailers need to remodel their network on a regular basis, but also the daily planning of their operations is becoming a lot more complex than what they used to be.
Yeah, no, I think certainly here in the United States, that the grocery industry is kind of in the spotlight again today. Obviously, a few weeks ago, Amazon announced that it was acquiring Whole Foods, so that has created a lot of speculation and a lot of excitement and also fear, if you will, in terms of what's going to happen to that
Yeah.
segment of the market here. But I think the high level trends you talked about there are also evident here. I think across multiple industries. The fact that whether it's retailers or other businesses are looking to carry less inventory, so they're looking for order in smaller quantities, order more frequently,
Yeah, absolutely.
more deliveries, and I think that's having a ripple effect, obviously, from a transportation standpoint.
Yes, definitely.
Now, what about a lot of discussion here around regulations, and that's having a big role here. Are regulations having a big impact there as well?
Oh, absolutely. The authorities on European level, national level, and even local level, they're constantly introducing new legislation with regards to health and safety, but especially the environment. But even earlier this week, Transport for London, which is the body that controls like all the main roads into London, they introduced a new rating system with regards to driver visibility on heavy goods vehicles. And that has a massive impact on the shippers, how they can deliver their products, because the transportation companies will have to basically introduce or buy new vehicles potentially. So it's a massive impact on the market, and that's besides all the environmental regulations that have been introduced and are becoming more and more stricter every single day.
Right. I mean, I think that's certainly one of the key differences, I think, between Europe and here in the U.S. The environmental and the sustainability types of regulations and considerations that I think are certainly more stringent there in Europe, or more widespread. I mean, I had a guest on the program earlier this year, also focused on Europe, and he kind of made the comment about that Europe is not the United States of Europe, right? It's actually very diverse, geography. I would think that, particularly from a regulation standpoint, that part of the challenge is harmonizing, if you will, or keeping track of all the different regulations for all the different member states that are part of Europe.
Well, I think the European Union has done a great job in trying to harmonize, and also with their policies with regards to how to influence transportation routes and links across Europe. But I think it's more on national and especially local level, where especially cities have increasing powers to basically restrict the access of heavy goods vehicles in the city centers at particular times of the day. And I think that is where I think most shippers and transport companies have to take into account.
Great. Yeah, no, I agree. I know there's always talk here about doing congestion pricing, or limiting in places like New York or LA or San Francisco. And I think I think Europe is further ahead in terms of implementing those types of policies. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see more and more that here in the United States as well.
Yeah.
Another topic that it's getting a lot of attention here in the U.S. is home delivery and discussion around the Amazon effect. I mentioned Amazon earlier. They continuously make the headlines here. I mean, are you seeing similar headlines there in Europe in terms of the Amazon effect and what's going on with home delivery?
Absolutely, and we see European retailers offer a full range of fulfillment services, from home delivery and click and collect, and especially I think click and collect is increasingly becoming more popular with consumers, and that's for the simple reason is that consumers don't have to stay at home to receive those deliveries, and especially with click and collect now being available beyond the typical collection in the store of the retailer where you've purchased it. It's also available from locker boxes, collection from dedicated pickup locations. And we've even seen a few examples where retailers are looking at, especially grocery retailers, to looking at delivery vans positioned as strategic routes at parking lots to basically assist people to collect their goods. And I think one of the key element there is that it's very important that retailers manage it correctly, because it can quickly become one of the most expensive ways to fulfill an order. And you can really see the difference between the novice and the best-in-class operators there. The customer experience in general is the same, but it's the back end that really makes the difference for the retailer, whether there is a reward for the retailer to actually offer that service. But there's also opportunities, of course, for these retailers. Think about Asda. I'm not familiar with Asda, but Asda is the UK's subsidiary of Walmart. And they've introduced a first of its kind of a groundbreaking collection service and return service to all their stores. And the unique thing there is that it only allows offers to the consumers to collect goods from Asda, but also goods from third-party retailers, especially online retailers, who have the benefit of taking advantage of basically this incredible infrastructure network that Asda has in place. But the good thing for Asda is that consumers tend to combine a click and collect with a quick in-store purchase. So Asda reckons that with all these additional collections they will get in store, they expect about 40 million extra by 2019. That means that they can potentially unlock new revenues by using the already available network that they've got.
That's a great example. I think it ties in nicely with a topic that I've been talking about and speaking about a lot in terms of how do you leverage logistics, transportation, your existing infrastructure and technology and so forth. Yeah. Not view it as a cost center, but you view it as a competitive weapon, as a way to drive revenue growth. And I think that's a great example there of Asda kind of leveraging their infrastructure and their capabilities to bring people to their stores, right? And ultimately, the main objective there is not only enhance the customer experience, but ultimately impact the top line.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a great opportunity that they saw. And we were very delighted to be part of that and offering kind of our algorithms and solutions to kind of determine the optimal routes and to kind of make that balance between service levels, as you said yourself, and profitability. So it's a great opportunity for retailers to look into.
Right. I mean, I've seen statistics in terms of, the adoption of things like click and collect, either at the store or in things like lockers and things like that. Yeah. Certainly much higher adoption rates there in Europe than here in the United States. So I think, for us here, I think it's worthwhile to take a look at, some of the best practices and leading practices, just like you described there, because I think there's a lot of lessons learned already and that companies here can start adopting. Right. Yeah. To navigate through this environment that everyone's talking about in terms of from an Amazon FX standpoint, which at the end of the day is really about you and I as consumers are really dictating the rules, aren't we?
Yeah. And it's interesting that when you say, you and I, we determine the rules, it's taken some of the retailers by surprise, whereas most retailers thought there would be a balance of 30% click and collect, 70% home delivery. In fact, in reality, it's the other way around. It's 70% click and collect and 30% home delivery. So, there's definitely an opportunity there to explore for US retailers.
Absolutely. And I think the key question there, and I think the key challenge is, how to do it profitably. Because I think that's where I know when I talk to a lot of retailers and other companies, and we'll talk about technology in just a minute here, but I think a lot of them, are realizing that, in order for them to do it profitably, they really have to rethink the way they do their, their operations. And, those that have been doing it with spreadsheets and fax machines and whiteboards, are quickly realizing that they can't get away with that anymore. So,
no.
But before we get into the technology piece, I mean, another thing here from kind of the U.S. standpoint that we kind of read a lot in the papers and been following the news is obviously Brexit, which has been going on for some time, and it's still kind of in the news. I mean, is that having an impact on the transportation throughout Europe?
Well, the real impact on transportation will largely depend if the UK government will be able to reach an agreement with the EU. And then, of course, what are the actual details of the agreement? But we can already see that the uncertainties surrounding Brexit, is particularly in terms of market access and border controls, means that transportation companies and shippers need to look at the various scenarios that might come out of these negotiations. And it might not be the perfect setup, but I think the industry body in the UK for road haulage, they clearly, that's the trucking organization in the UK, they highlighted that it might not be the best solution, but it's almost perfect for them. And what is their main concern is the fact that British companies, transportation companies, might not be able to transport between countries in Europe in the future, which they can do at the moment, which of course can really impact their profit margins. So it's a big thing. The good thing for them is that Theresa May and also Chris Grayling, who is Secretary of State for Transportation, they both have highlighted the importance of the transportation sector to the UK. And of course, when you look at it, the actual cost. So if there are borders implemented as a result of this, or negotiations and new tariffs will come up, the cost of goods will go up. So it's very likely that companies are going to look into transportation technology in a way to offset these costs, because otherwise they will have to pass on these tariffs onto the customers, and that's the last thing that most of the retailers want to do at this point in time. So it's an interesting situation.
Right. Well, it seems like it's certainly something that people need to really keep a pulse on, and depending on how it goes, it could either it could potentially, if it doesn't go in the quote unquote right way, it can add more complexity, more costs, more constraints to the transportation puzzle that needs to be resolved. So let's talk about technology now, and like I mentioned, I know I've been following the industry now for over 18 years, and it still surprises me that there are still a lot of companies out there that are still managing their transportation operations with spreadsheets and fax machines and whiteboards and all that, even though TMS solutions have been around for a long time. I mean, how would you characterize the state of TMS adoption and technology adoption there in Europe?
I think the adoption of TMS is fairly good. I think what is the real challenge is, if you look at the transportation market, the 10 largest transportation companies in Europe, they only cover about 10% of the transportation market. So it's still largely fragmented. So 90% of the operators are like the single or like a couple of vehicles they operate in their business. So I think what the shippers are really looking at ways at unlocking that potential to work with those smaller operators in the markets, which they can't do at the moment, because those smaller operators, they can't invest in technology the same way that the large transportation companies can do. One of the things that Manhattan has done as part of our Manhattan active transportation solution, we've introduced something called TMS Mobile, which basically reduces the cost for both retailers and small operators to go in the tender process, the procurement of the services that can be provided by the smaller operators, and also to provide the tracking, the visibility of where the goods are, because that's at the end of the day what the shippers do want. So we think there's a massive potential there for shippers to unlock that new ways to improve customer service, customer offering, and at the same time bringing down the cost of shipping.
Yeah, I was going to ask, and you brought it up because it seems to me that advancements that have been made with mobile technology, and you gave a great example there. GPS. Here in the United States, there's regulations around ELDs, electronic logging devices, and the price points of those have come down, significantly. So it seems like every driver these days probably has a smartphone of some sort, right? And because these devices all have GPS in them and you can connect to cellular networks as opposed to satellite, the opportunity to now communicate and collaborate and send information, provide that visibility is greater than ever.
Yeah, and that's exactly where the TMS Mobile is hitting it. It's freely available for the smaller operators. You can download it from an Apple store or from the Google Play Store, and they can basically use it. So there's not a lot of technology required on their side, because they will have that, like you said yourself, that mobile phone that has all the technology that they need. So it's just a fantastic way to basically reduce the cost and to unlock new markets for both shippers and for transportation companies.
Great. Now, we talked about, some of the complexity kind of in the grocery industry and what's happening there. We talked about, Brexit and potentially some more added complexity there. Yeah. We talked about the Amazon effect and different fulfillment models. The way I see it is that, that kind of screams for the need for companies to adopt optimization technology to kind of really, it's becoming increasingly difficult to kind of do this with even just Excel macros. A lot of times when companies have adopted TMS in the past, they start out with the execution piece, right? Automate the things that they were doing manually. And optimization was always a phase two. And sometimes I never even got to that phase two. Are you seeing the tide starting to turn there? Are you seeing companies saying, you know what, we're going to make optimization part of phase one because we really need it?
It has to be. It has to be. And people looking at a constant optimization as well. So I think people even gone beyond that. And I think people recognize the need to be able to model their network on a regular basis because of the changing behavior of consumers and all the other challenges. So it's a fast moving supply chains basically. And so yes, definitely modeling is important there, but also like constant optimization. So they realize that in order to reduce the cost in their supply chain, they need to unlock all these different options that they've got and not have the static routes, if you like. It's constantly looking at like, hey, what's the best way of using our infrastructure that we have in place?
Right. Yeah. So this whole concept, this whole area of dynamic or streaming optimization has certainly become, more and more important. And I think, I think what makes it even more powerful or even realistic today is the fact that you've got with, cloud computing and, advancements in the algorithms and the mathematics behind it. I think, today, it's more of a reality than ever before. Mark, we're kind of running short on time here, so I'm just going to go right to my last question. As a way to, wrap up, I mean, what advice would you give to transportation and logistics, executives who, are dealing with, these trends and challenges that we talked about? I mean, what action should they take, today to make sure that they're positioned for success moving forward?
Well, we've highlighted several times during our conversation, like the supply chains are in a state of constant flux. So, and to take into account like additional external factors like Brexit, fast changing consumer buying behavior. That means that, and other complexities, that means that it highlights the dynamic nature basically of supply chains globally. And you need to have the systems in place to allow you to automate, like you said yourself, optimize, adapt, and be better prepared for disruption. Because I think that is the key thing that people often forget, is that planning your supply chain is one thing, is dealing with the exceptions, the disruptions to your business. How do you handle that? And if you don't have the systems in place that can help you with the optimization and kind of the visibility in your network, you're going to lose out. So I think it's definitely a focus that needs to be in place.
That's a great point. And I guess, circling back to the technology piece, because the operating environment is so dynamic and you have to deal with exceptions, and, the transportation operating realities of today are not necessarily going to be the ones the operating reality of tomorrow. And maybe the processes that you need to enable are going to continuously be changing. The technology needs to be, to use the kind of the buzz terms that we like to use as analysts, there needs to be, agile, adaptable, easy to reconfigure, correct?
Yeah, and absolutely. And that's especially when you talk to the shippers, especially the grocery retailers, they will tell you that what's working today will not work for tomorrow. So that's definitely the takeaway.
Great. Well, Mark, I always like to say at the end of our episodes, we always just manage to scratch the surface on the topics that we cover. But I think we covered a lot of ground today, and I appreciate you making the time to share your perspective and insights and advice on this topic.
You're very welcome, and looking forward to our next session.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank those of you that joined us today. If you are watching this episode on demand, either at the Manhattan Associates website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Mark, you can post it there, and I'm sure that he'd be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you all, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.